Hi everybody, we're back. This is Brian and I'm here with another Fusion 360 tutorial. Today we are exploring the concept or the feature of Loft. Loft is a relatively complex feature. It can be difficult to control, but it yields very, very interesting geometries very quickly. So I'm splitting this up into a couple shorter videos. This first one is really just kind of giving you the basics of Loft. So Loft exists by creating two profiles, well, minimum of two profiles, and letting Fusion kind of solve a resulting geometry that connects those two profiles. So let me just do an example rather than talk about this in theory, since we are doing video. So I am going to create a sketch on my top plane. So I'm going to hover over my top plane, select that plane, and this first sketch, I'm going to use the center rectangle, and I'm going to draw in just a rectangle. I'm not going to pay too much attention to the scale or size of it. This is more about just understanding the concept of Loft. So I finished the sketch. There it is. I've got a rectangle. You can see it's blue. It's not fully defined. That's okay. Now what I want to do is I want to create another profile, and I'm going to create a loft between them. Really, that other profile can exist on any other plane except for the plane that the rectangle is drawn on. It can be parallel to this plane here. It doesn't have to be. For this example, I'm going to create a plane that is parallel to this, but it could certainly be a plane that's at an angle to that. We can talk about how to do that in another video, but I'm just, again, doing the basics. So I need to create another plane. So I'm going to choose the offset plane feature here, and I'm going to choose the plane that my rectangle is drawn in. So I can actually use the surface of my rectangle as a plane. And I'm just going to pull this up 40 millimeters. That sounds good. And click OK. Now I'm going to create a sketch on that new plane that I just created. And this time I'm going to choose this circle as my profile. We're just going to make it a little bit smaller than rectangle. Could be bigger, doesn't matter. And I'm going to go ahead and finish the sketch. Now you can see I have two profiles that exist on separate planes. The two planes in this case, again, happen to be parallel to one another. Now comes the Loft feature. So I'm going to go Create, I'm going to go to Loft, I'm going to choose the two profiles. I'm going to say I want to loft from the rectangle to the circle. And you can see Fusion creates a geometry that goes from rectangle to circle. Once you do that, you can see that you have these lines that go up. And so this is just Fusion saying, all right, the simplest form of this is me just carrying this line up and evening this out. You can adjust where these lines come from and the number of lines that you have. And that actually modifies then kind of the resulting geometry. So if I zoom in here, I can grab this handle of this one, and I can start to pull that slightly around. I can grab this one and do the same thing. I'm going to rotate around, and I can grab this handle here and rotate around. And I can grab this handle here and rotate around. And you'll see the end result of that is a very different geometry. It starts to have a bit of a spiral pattern, right? Now, I just sort of grabbed and pulled these, and that's what I'm saying is this can be really difficult to control because it's hard to give it parameters. I would have had to set up, you know, like points on my circle as I went. But you can see the further I pull those over, the more twisty this thing gets, the more spiraled it gets. The one thing you have to be careful of when you do this is that you don't create a self-intersecting geometry. So if I get this point to cross over, so that if this line starts to cross over this line, that will be a self-intersecting geometry, and Fusion will not be able to solve that, right? And so you have to be careful on moving these kind of one at a time as I go around to start to create this geometry. But anyway, you can see from the beginning geometry I started with, this geometry very, very different, right? Because I've now adjusted how those spiral patterns work into that. So that's the simplest form of Loft. And again, you can already see all of the things that you can play with. Now, I'm going to click Cancel here, and we can make this even more more complicated by adding a couple other profiles. So I'm going to create a couple more planes, and we will create a geometry between said planes. So I'm going to do offset plane. I'm going to choose this circle. I'm going to pull another plane up from that, create a sketch on that plane. We can do, let's just do another circle here. Finish sketch. All right, and then let's do another plane, offset plane from this surface. Come up another 30 or 40. Here we go. Okay, and we'll create a sketch on that plane, and we will, let's do a polygon. We'll do a polygon. Oops. There we go. Okay. So now I have a bunch of different geometries. So what we can do now is go create Loft. The only thing that matters here is the order, right? So I can't, I might be able to go from here to here to here. It will create a very unique feature, but let's just do them in order. And as I do that, you can see the geometry that results from that starts to become pretty complicated, right? If I click this closed button, what that does is that creates a geometry that closes. So it'll go from the outside to the inside 2. So if I zoom in here, you can see it like goes up to that hole there, and it goes down to that hole there, and it closes that geometry. So even within the context of just those 4 profiles, by clicking one button, I now get a Loft that goes around all 4 of those. So it's connected. It returns back the top profile back to the bottom profile and makes a continuous solid. So again, you can always edit these features, and I can uncheck closed. I can uncheck change selection if I want to. I can start to go in and play with these guide rails. See that? I just deselected that profile. There we go. Now this is going to give me an error because it goes, it's going to intersect itself. So it's going to give me an error because of it's going from 3 back to 4. That's not going to work, so I need to delete that. And we need to delete this one, and then I need to go here and then here, right? Because what it was trying to do was trying to go from this profile back to this profile, and it was intersecting itself. So it's really easy, if you're not paying attention, to make things that are problematic inside of Fusion. But once I do this, even when I have this, you can start to play with these guide rails, these guide points, and I can start to spin this geometry a little bit more and really affect how this thing looks. So again, really unique, interesting geometry, quite difficult to control when we start to play with all of those different things. But that's the simple form of Loft. In the next video, I'll show you how to add guide rails, and we can make a slightly more complicated geometry that we're controlling. And in that case, I'm just going to use 2 different profiles, but we'll be controlling how the Loft moves between them by adding these guide rails. So tune in to part 2, and I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.